This is Goodwhispers, and today we're going to open the old lady box again. I've been thinking about school days, so I'm going to find some pictures and remember. Childhood, no matter how tough it can be, can also be magical. Magical memories. Let's find them. Ah, yes, Mrs. Geisel, my kindergarten teacher. I remember when her hair changed color. And back in the days when families sat down to have dinner together every night, I brought up the fact that Mrs. Geisel's hair color had changed, and my mother said, rather casually, I wonder if she dyed it, or if it's a wig. So the next day I went to school, and I asked Mrs. Geisel, did you dye your hair, or is it a wig? Consequently, I spent the rest of recess on the carpet. Well, it really was all very innocent for a 6-year-old. But let me share a magical moment from that time. February. February is a wonderful month for me. In the States, we used to celebrate 2 birthdays during that time period as holidays. Washington's birthday and Lincoln's birthday. There also was Valentine's Day. The month was short. Oh, and yes, my birthday was in that month. Occasionally, every 4 years, there was a leap year. So February was a very magical month. And the year I turned 6, I was able to take cookies that were shaped like hearts with little sprinkles into class and share them with everybody. I love to share. After school, we went up to Big Bear. That's a place up in the mountains above Los Angeles to spend the weekend at a cabin. I prayed for snow, as I'd never seen snow in my life, much less snow that fell from the sky. When we got to the cabin, there was snow everywhere, and my little sister and I played in it all weekend. We saw the frozen lake, we tobogganed, and as we were leaving late Sunday, that was my actual birthday, it began to snow. I was so happy I got my wish. The snow was like God giving my little 6-year-old girl self her her birthday wish. I'm not going to say much about my first grade teacher, as she was so mean. She had the reddest hair you'd ever seen. It was as if her head was on fire. Mrs. Guy, I watched her make children cry and even wet their pants. I myself spelled up backwards and got into trouble. She was having us spell things, going around the room, spelling them out loud. And when you spell up backwards, it's P-U. That was a no-no I learned. But in any event, as she scolded me, I was able to hide my face behind another child's head. Of course, I was scolded for that too. Second grade was much better year. That was the year of all A's for me. Mrs. Orman said I was a good writer, and I still have a paper here in my old lady box of a creative writing story I wrote in the 2nd grade and got an A on. Every summer, Mrs. Orman went somewhere in the world like China, Thailand, India, and she brought back slides to show her children whatever class that was that year. I loved it. I loved seeing the other places in the world. She also did something else that was absolutely wonderful. As a class, we made homemade bread. We all got to add the ingredients. We all got to take turns kneading the dough. We even made homemade butter, and she passed around the jar for everybody to shake it as many times as they could. And one of the best parts was eating it. Mrs. Orman also said I had a great talent for music, And that's because I lingered one day after class when the lightning and the thunder was pelting the earth, which didn't happen in Los Angeles very often. I lingered because she was playing the piano. When she noticed me, she called me over, and I shyly walked over to her and responded to her when she said, "Do you know how to sing?" And I quietly asked her if she knew how to play Tura, Lura, Lura, which she did, and I sang to it. She said I had a beautiful voice and needed to work on it. So she gave me an A, and that A followed me in music the rest of my life. I always brought animals home. I remember when I was 6, my dad brought home a rabbit and gave it to me. It was a beautiful light golden brown, soft rabbit fur and brown eyes. I named him Snoopy. During the 9 years I had that rabbit, when I was around 7, I once cried to him, and I told my Snoopy rabbit how mean my mother was to me. We had already had the rabbit like a year, maybe a year and a half, when my mother, who always had held the rabbit before, suddenly developed an allergic reaction to the rabbit every time she was around him. I thought that was quite odd. I'm not going to make a big deal about it because I don't like foundations based on sensationalism. Now, my mother believed in summer school, so we always had to go. In the summer before 3rd grade, my teacher was giving away kittens. I asked my mom if I could have one. She said as long as it was a male, it would be okay. The teacher swore up and down it was a male, so I took it home. But a few months later, Mama Kitty, as she would become known, had kittens behind the dryer in the kitchen. By 3rd grade, the problems that I'd always had began to be distinctive, but the school and my parents and everyone didn't pick up on it. They didn't know about things like that in those days. One of the problems I had, and I had 2, and I'll tell you briefly about them. I had the worst case in medical journalistic history of chronic mastoiditis until AIDS came along and complicated the situation. My mom had some problems, so I wasn't taken to the doctor about my ear problems till I was around 10. Then I had to have several surgeries and was in the specialist office every week for 3 years. But up until that point, I had to suffer a lot with my ear. 1, it drained all the time. 2, I couldn't hear anything. Now I'm going to go into my second problem because they tie in together. I had Asperger's, which is a high-functioning autism. Now, when you have Asperger's, you're in your own world. That's all I can describe it like. I had a couple of friends, but it was hard for me to make friends, and the other children teased me. I couldn't get out of my own little world. It was as if I could see other people, but I was in a bubble, and they were in their own world. I was in my bubble that I lived in, and they were on the other side of the water. I'm trying to describe this to you. And I could not feel like I was with them or part of them. I was alone with me. I could not hear them, and I was frightened to look them in their face. But because of my hearing problem, unlike other Aspies, I had to look at them in the face, even though the overload feelings would bomb me. Yeah, it was like a bomb, relentlessly. I had to read their lips because of my acute hearing problems. And for the remainder of elementary school, I decided I would just sit as far back in the back of the room as I could. I got one of those chairs that had a folding arm desk, and I'd put it right up against where you hung your coats, right by the door. And I would draw pictures all day. I never did any schoolwork. Never. The daily assignments, homework, weekly assignments, I never did them. I was tuned out, drawing pictures. I didn't get much sleep because of the ear problem. So I had a lot to take on as a kid. But it wasn't all bad. I never missed the beauty. The blue of the sky was so blue and vivid to me. The sound and the smell of the ocean. Now, I like to go on the beach in winter because I could be by myself. I really had no problem being by myself. But when you're a kid, you usually find somebody to hang out with. And I did that. I was obsessive with whatever interested me. Now, I had no equilibrium, so I had to work really, really hard at anything I did. I was very dizzy because of my ear problems. And in California, gymnastics was mandatory. Well, the year I had to take mandatory gymnastics, I went from 5 foot to 5'8" in 1 year. So needless to say, I was pretty clumsy. Plus, I didn't have any equilibrium. I had to work so hard at gymnastics, but I did it. And I was so klutzy at dancing. So I practiced obsessively every day till I became the best dancer anywhere. But it took time. And that's one thing I want to tell younger Aspies. It's very difficult in your childhood, in your teen years, young adult, mid-adult. But when you become an older adult, if you keep working on things, keep going through it, you will overcome a lot of the things. Like being able to put your thoughts into a sentence, being able to convey what's going on inside and bring it out. It takes a long time. When I was young, there's no way I could put things into sentences. They got all jumbled up. The words got all wrong. With some close friends, I could function, but in a big group or in a classroom setting, it was near impossible. And I don't think anybody knew any of this was going on. By the 6th grade, Mr. Berger, Mr. Berger decided to call me out. And I was in my desk chair way back by the closet, by the door, because I secretly wanted to make my great escape as soon as possible. Well, he picked a very, very difficult, long word, and he wanted me to spell it. And the whole class had their eyes on me. Oh my God, she's been singled out. Oh yeah, her. Yeah, it was me. I was supposed to spell the word, but I did it. Yay! I was able to spell that word. And then I was able to go back into my own world. So instead of being part of the group in class, I was isolated in the group, and it was a very dark time. And like I say, I became obsessed with anything that interested me. I'd read everything about it, think about it, go to sleep thinking about it, wake up thinking about it, day after day after day. No one knew, just me. I would read books like on Cleopatra or Caesar or the Ptolemies or mythology, and read every book in the school library, then go to the city library, and if that wasn't enough, I would go to another county's library. And like I said, I never did daily or weekly schoolwork, ever, but when the tests came around, I passed them all. One thing I think is very hard that Asperger's should watch out for, and that's the amount of adrenaline that flows. I think I lived on adrenaline for probably the first 30 or 40 years of my life, and that's not healthy. It's where your anxiety gets so high in performing just daily routines, trying to cope, trying to communicate, that you have a lot of adrenaline pumping out all the time. And you can end up literally, instead of having vitamins or minerals or good food or something, you can end up living on your adrenaline. And you have to really watch out for this. You may not even know that you're doing it. So like I said, I never missed the beauty, and that really sustained me in coping with the world. And there's another thing I'd like to warn Aspies about, and that's in your relationships and trying to establish a relationship. Don't try, and you will, but be aware, because you won't. But now I'm telling you so you can. Be aware of trying to pull somebody into your world that's not in your world. You'll think that's what love is by getting them to come in your world. Well, certainly they would love you if they understood you, but you're pulling them into your world, and they really don't have the capacity to be in your world. And if you find that, that would be great. But don't use that as a measurement for if you're loved or not, because it could make your life really, really difficult, and as if it isn't already. There are many stories I can tell you, and maybe next time when I open the old lady box, I can share the supernatural side of my life with you. But until then, this is Good Whispers, wishing you all peace, love, and joy. Pass it around.